So I'm really pleased to be joined by an amazing panel again. So we've got Sarah Carhill, who's the Chief Pharmaceutical Officer's Clinical Fellow at NHSX. We've got Nabila Chowdhury, who's the Director of Pharmacy at Babylon. And we've also got Zeenab Hussain, who is the Associate Chief Clinical Information Officer and Global Digital Medicines Consultant. So welcome, everybody. So today we're going to be talking about the role of pharmacists and what we can do in digital health and in health technology and in wider healthcare. So we'll be going through everyone's different roles and how they got there. And then also, how do we empower more women to take on these roles in technology, which sometimes can be seen as a bit of a male-orientated arena. And then also we'll be looking at what skills that we can take from, the transferable skills that we've got from pharmacy that we traditionally know and how we can apply them in the technology and digital health world. So I will won't waste any more time, and I will get the panels to introduce themselves and talk about their experience. So I'll start off with Sarah. Sarah, did you want to talk about your experience and how you got the role that you're currently doing?
Yeah.
And how and what you're doing.
So my name is Sarah, and I'm the clinical fellow this year at NHSX. So for those of you who don't know, NHSX is a joint unit between the Department of Health and Social Care and NHS EI, and it leads the digital strategy for the NHS and social care. So it supports clinical teams and priority areas across the NHS. And as the digital transformation arm of NHS EI, it's been supporting the health and care systems to make the shift towards digitally enabled frontline services, in particular during the pandemic. And before joining NHSX, I completed a fellowship year at the RPS, where I supported Team England and the education team. And my kind of background is in hospital pharmacy. So I first became interested in utilising technology to improve patient safety because I was the Royal Free, so where I did my junior training, was selected as one of the global digital exemplar sites. And I just happened to be the ward pharmacist on the pilot ward, and I quickly kind of realized the positive impact that electronic prescribing and medicine administration, so EPMA, can have both on staff and patients in terms of delivering safer, more efficient care. I then joined the EPMA team, and we were implementing Cerner EPR, so electronic patient record, across Barnet and Chase Farm sites. And this was a really challenging role as we went with a big bang method, which kind of basically means the whole hospital went live over one weekend. And like most projects, there was many teething problems with the systems. But I think the most valuable lesson that I learned is that it's people first and then technology, and not technology. So for any digital transformation project to be successful or to work, it only works if everyone is on board. So not just the informatics team, but the whole entire, you're looking at clinicians, non-clinicians, everyone who uses the system. And if they're on board, and it's really about communication skills, because they're your champions, they're the people who are going to be using the system every day, and you want to make sure that the system is fit for purpose and optimized so that it can deliver what you want it to and what they want it to. So I'm now working with the Digitizing Medicines team and the Interoperable Medicines program at NHSX. So the kind of work that I'm helping to deliver in NHSX is to do with the increase of the adoption of DM+D across secondary care. So DM+D is the NHS Dictionary of Medicines and Devices, and it's the standard that the Dictionary for Medicines is used in the UK. So the primary purpose of the standard is to support interoperability, which basically for any electronic systems that exchange or share information about medicines relating directly to a patient's care, they must adhere to the standard. And so they must use the DM+D identifiers and descriptions when transferring medicine information. So the main reason for starting the Interoperable Medicines program is to address the challenges of transferring medicines data around the system reliably, and also ensuring that accurate information about the patient's medication can be accessed promptly by whoever needs it, when and wherever they need it. And we're all aware as clinicians how important it is that everyone can access patient data, because that obviously can help, and you don't have patients kind of repeating the same thing over and over again, which can be both frustrating for the patient, but also you can basically increase errors and has an impact on patient safety. So I'm learning loads about kind of the importance of providing frameworks and associated standards that enable these systems to be developed using interoperable technology and capabilities, so that medicine information can flow across the NHS, so regardless of sector, and ultimately create a kind of consolidated patient medication record. which will eventually in the future allow for EPMA to EPMA, so hospital transfer for patients transferred from one hospital to another on admission, so any information that's held at a GP, and vice versa, so the opposite way around, and also inpatient ordering, so that you can order from your electronic patient medication administration system to your pharmacy stock management system. So this is all really important, and obviously something that we've all kind of been championing about and really want to join up that care to make seamless care. I've also been working on the national COVID vaccine programme. So this is focusing on data capture of the vaccine across secondary care and how we can feed this data into a national dashboard, which will help with forecasting and allocating of the vaccine across the country. And this is a really collaborative project. So I was working closely with system suppliers, secondary care sites, and also data analysts at NHSEI to ensure that we had the correct data, so that we had the right information feeding into a dashboard. And again, this is something that I didn't have much kind of experience in before joining NHSX, so this has been a really fantastic kind of opportunity to see what's happening out there in the wider health system.
Brilliant, thanks, Sarah. It's interesting what you said, because everything that you've touched on we use every day as practicing pharmacists, and so sometimes I think it's so obvious as integral that you don't think that someone needs to do that system or deliver the system. So that's great, thank you. Nabila, so yeah, tell us about your role and your experience so far.
Yeah, absolutely. So I work at Babylon Health as Director of Pharmacy at the moment. I joined Babylon around 5 years ago, completely by accident. So just wanted a change from kind of working community, which is primarily my background. Had done a year at the GPHC and really just wanted to do something different. So kind of just stumbled upon Babylon. We're a really new startup, so I've really been able to experience the startup mentality, which is really great. When I started working at Babylon, there were about 50 employees, and there are probably just under 3,000 now. So we've seen an immense level of growth in just under 5 years. Most of the people in the organization when I joined were male. So most of the guys were software engineers, product managers, all to do with kind of building that tech, and most of them were male. So I was definitely in a minority, being female and also of being of ethnic origin as well. But kind of I just fell in love with it, really. You know, there's no other way to describe it. It's incredibly rewarding because I'm able to implement change and see it very quickly because of the pace of change that we have. So we've obviously seen a massive growth of the organisation. So the number of patients has also grown immensely, and I've been able to be able to influence some kind of change over those people. So I started off as the only pharmacist 5 years ago, and now there is a team of something like 50 pharmacists across a number of countries as well. So we have sectors in Rwanda, Canada, the States, and some guys starting off in Malaysia as well, which is super, super exciting. My role consists of a number of different things. So I head the team in the UK. So I head the team of pharmacists. We're all independent prescribers, and we all consult digitally. So we all do the video and telephone consultations. And we were kind of ahead of the COVID curve, so to speak. So we started that many years before the COVID pandemic, which now everyone has really adopted and kind of owned. I also have a big part in regulatory and governance. So, for example, I'll always be interviewed by the CQC inspectors in the UK, and also have a part to play in the regulatory aspects of the global organisation. And then I also help improve the tech. So I will work very closely with the tech teams to help build requirements for things in the app, for our clinical systems, or for anything else that our team is kind of developing. So it's a really, really exciting role for me, definitely. There's a lot of change and a lot of growth, but kind of a really super exciting job to have. Definitely very lucky.
Brilliant. Thank you, Nabila. That sounds really exciting, especially now with COVID and all being online. I mean, even just this chat. So you're definitely ahead of the curve there. And Zeenab, so yeah, tell us about your role and how you got there.
Sure. So hi everyone, I'm Zeenab. So my current job title, as you've already said, is Associate Chief Clinical Information Officer. So in a similar vein to Sarah, I started off as a hospital clinical pharmacist. So I did my pre-reg and kind of the step training, foundation training at King's. And King's was kind of a digitally mature organisation at the time that I did my training. So that's probably where my interest kind of in digital ignited. But having said that, I think even as a student, my thesis was based on, some of you might be familiar with Mosaic. So it's a chemotherapy prescribing system at Guy's and St. Thomas's. And I, as part of my undergraduate research, I was looking at user experience with that clinical system. So from a very early age, I was kind of really interested in digital systems and how they can improve patient safety. But after I kind of did my clinical foundation training, I went into Imperial to do, again, very similar project to Sarah. So looking at implementing EPMA across the organisation. And then after that, went on to Lewisham and Greenwich and did, again, a very similar project there. But whilst I was at Lewisham and Greenwich, I was exposed to kind of lots of other consulting projects, which gave me a massive amount of exposure to kind of other non-EPMA digital tools that we could use in secondary care. So I got the opportunity to consult at King's in Dubai. So this was a private facility that was set up kind of around clinical and digital systems. So we implemented a paperless closed loop system, which was really exciting. So everything was fully digital, automated from the point at which you received medicines into the hospital until you administered them to the patient. So seeing that was really exciting, and the possibilities of kind of bringing that over to the UK. So at the moment I'm doing an MSc kind of in digital health, and that's the foundation of my thesis. So how will we bring closed loop medicines across to the UK, and how can we implement them, knowing that our healthcare systems are quite different to the UAE and to the US, but actually we can incorporate some of those safety benefits here as well. So yeah, that's kind of what I've been working on. My current role at the moment, so I work at Lewisham and Greenwich most of the time, alongside kind of the consulting that I do at other organisations. And we've got quite a few digital programmes looking at population health management and shared care platforms to try and address some of the health inequalities that we have in South East London especially. And the COVID vaccination programme is a really good example of that, because we've had huge amounts of inequality kind of come through from people who are and aren't receiving the vaccine. And it's really coming through. And so we're trying to address some of that through using digital tools and data, and looking at, down to the postcode of actually where are people not getting the vaccine. And actually now we know we can target them, we can go and speak to them, drop leaflets through their door, have a conversation. So that's been really powerful, I think. But yeah, I think similar to Nabila mentioned it. So we're one of very kind of few females who work in the digital health space. I meet very few females in most meetings that I'm in. I don't meet any that wear hijab. So, very, very unique and quite difficult, I think, in some of these conversations, because it's hard to influence others, when they're not like you, they don't necessarily always, take you seriously almost. So it's challenging to influence others. But I think, I'm sure we'll come on to that in a bit more detail, but I think it's really important to try and continue to kind of break those glass ceilings and to make it through, to help others kind of come up behind you, because I think that diversity is so, so important to try and address some of the issues that we're facing. So, there's no way we're going to fix some of the problems that we're having unless we change things, unless we bring in diversity of thought and people with different backgrounds. So I think that's really exciting that that's changing slowly.
Brilliant. Thank you, Zeenab. No, that's such a good point about that diversity, and also the importance of role models, because if you can see someone like yourself doing these roles, then you're more likely to, be encouraged to go for them. I'm sure we've all got our own role models that we've looked up to that got us where we are. So before we go back to that diversity question, I just wanted to kind of bring it back to the digital health and tech, and why is it important within pharmacy, and why we need to kind of be considering pharmacist roles in this area. So Nabila, I'll start with you with this question.
I mean, it's so important. I cannot stress. The question that I would ask is, why wouldn't pharmacists be involved in digital health? I think not enough of us have the confidence to do that, to ask that question. We're kind of just shying on the background and shying away behind the line and thinking, well, why should I be involved in this? And the question we should be asking is, why shouldn't we be involved? We interact with patients on a daily basis, and Sarah, you touched upon it in terms of clinical systems and talking to each other. That is so important in whatever sector of pharmacy that you're working in. So regardless of whether you're in community, secondary care, any other sector, it's so important for clinical systems to be talking to each other. So if we don't have the insight of the skill of pharmacists, then we won't have that diversity. We won't be solving all the problems that we need to in that particular space. I mean, digital health is the way forward. I mean, COVID just accelerated it. So we were around way before COVID came, and yeah, change is difficult. So change is never easy. And we encountered some resistance in the early years, but now everyone's doing consultations digitally. We've had to adapt. We've had to be able to change it. It's definitely the way forward. Our patients want it, so we definitely know that from feedback. And like I said, the question that I would ask is, why wouldn't we want to be involved? We should be putting ourselves forward and recognizing, have the confidence to recognize the expertise that we have there.
Brilliant. Thank you, Nabila. Zeenab?
So we have digital in every part of our lives. Why would we not have it in healthcare? It just doesn't make any sense. And as pharmacists, our role is to be the experts when it comes to medicines and safety with use of medicines. So if we know that digital tools can help us kind of prevent error and introduce more safety benefits, why would we not kind of adopt that? And so pharmacists are they're just best placed to then be able to leverage the digital tools to deliver that medicine safety that we're seeking. And as Nabila mentioned, COVID's accelerated a lot of this. So it's actually the way forward now. No one's really thinking about going back to doing things the way they were. Actually, this is the way forward. This is the new normal. So I think, yeah, absolutely. As the experts, we should be driving the use of that forward.
Brilliant. Thank you. And Sarah?
Nabila and Zeenab have both said we've definitely seen a kind of proliferation of technology because of COVID, and with the uptick of virtual consultations and digital health emergence has led to improved health services and greater patient empowerment, and also continuity of care. As Zeenab mentioned, pharmacists are really important. They're imperative, and the importance of patient-centered care is growing, and we can see that in kind of every policy that's come out at the moment recently. And pharmacists are often the last healthcare professional that interacts with the patient in the process of accessing their medicines. So they're in the ideal position to facilitate those digital health services. And everyone now has an iPhone or a Fitbit watch, or I don't know if I can say brands, but a Bluetooth enabled device. So which can have kind of, and also like your blood pressure cuffs, which can communicate with your EHR, so your integrated digital health tools, and they can help manage chronic disease management and tackle medication adherence, which we know is a massive problem and has kind of continued to be. So the need for these digital health tools to work together is critical to manage patient care, and that we can kind of access that and interpret patients' vitals in real time, and then communicate with the patient, whether it's virtually or face-to-face, with their primary or their secondary care clinician, to escalate care as needed, or as well to kind of empower that patient to take responsibility for their own care. I think that's one of the really powerful things with digital health, is actually giving that responsibility and ownership of your health back to the patient, and helping them to kind of manage it appropriately and safely.
Yeah, no, brilliant. Thank you. And I suppose as pharmacists, we're very process driven, and is that a skill that can be transferred? Because the challenge or the question that people might have is, if you're very patient focused currently, what transferable skills can you take into the digital world, and to try and apply for these roles? So Zeenab, if I start with you on that question.
Yeah, so I think particularly as women, we tend to be we put ourselves down quite a bit, I think. And I think actually, if we think about the way I touched on this earlier, if we think about the challenges that we're facing kind of today in our communities and our societies, we need to think of new ways to solve some of these problems. And I think women bring an entirely new perspective to some of this, and a new kind of diversity of thought, essentially, of bringing new ways, new solutions. But women don't seem to have the confidence to really get into these to these roles. And actually, it doesn't really require a huge amount of technical skills. You don't need to be a technical person to do some of this stuff. Actually, a lot of it is just about thinking strategically, thinking about the big picture, thinking about what's best for patients. And you only have to be human to think about how you would want to be treated, how you would want access to healthcare. So I think there's something about us needing to give women kind of confidence to undertake these roles. And I think there are challenges. Again, Nabila mentioned this, it's a male-dominated environment. And I think things like job adverts and job descriptions, maybe the phrasing doesn't necessarily lend itself that well to kind of encouraging women to apply. There's also kind of the separate issue of women not necessarily thinking that they can do a job. So they'll look at a job description and think, oh, there's that one bit of criteria that I don't meet, so I'm not going to apply. And men will just kind of go for it. And quite often get the job. So I think we just need to really give women confidence to go for something. So if you see a role, you're not 100% sure kind of what it's about, then just speak to somebody in that role, because I think you just need to know you're absolutely able to undertake that role. So that's really kind of just the advice that I'd give. You don't necessarily need technical skills. You just kind of need to be able to speak to other people, have a strategic outlook on what you think is necessary.
Brilliant. Thank you, Zeenab. Yes, Sarah, how do we empower more women to get into digital health?
I think it kind of starts really, doesn't it, with the younger generation. So, for instance, Inspiring the Future is where you kind of visit schools, and I've signed up to that, where you share your career journey. So it's really important that, you know, girls at a young age see women in jobs, in tech jobs or science jobs or any STEM roles where we know that there is a lack of women applying for these jobs. So to see kind of people like you, or someone that then inspires you that actually I can do it, I'm more than capable, I'm more than able. Because as Zeenab mentioned, that is one of the kind of really strong and consistent points that comes across, is that women will look at a job application and see what they can't do rather than what they can do. And I think it's to find people working in an area that you would like to specialize in, and reach out to them, ask questions, and you'll be pleasantly surprised. I mean, I have been of how friendly people are and how willing they are to offer support and advice and share their journey, and actually kind of, you know, say maybe you should try this, or this is also something that I did that benefited me. And finding a mentor is really crucial, to like build up your network, which I suppose you can do on different social media platforms, whether it's LinkedIn or through the RPS mentorship scheme. And it's also remembering, Zeenab mentioned this too, is it's not always about the technical, it's the people first. And if you can communicate clearly that vision you have, then that's kind of half the battle. And we're used to working within multidisciplinary teams. So build your multidisciplinary team in a kind of the tech world is actually slightly different. Like Nabila mentioned, it's your technical architects, your software developers, but it's the same kind of principle, and actually finding that team, and remembering what your USP is, so your kind of selling point is as a pharmacist, is to implement change and improve patient care. So not forgetting that as well, and working together. I think it's really, I mean, the thing is just reaching out to people and finding a network.
Brilliant. Thank you, Sarah. And Nabila.
Yeah, I completely agree with what you've both said. So, you know, you don't need to have masses of technical skills. You don't need to tick every box on every job description. I think the key really is being patient-centered. So I think one of the things that makes me good at my job is always remembering the patient. So whenever I'm in any kind of meeting, kind of thinking about any decisions that need to be made on any of the tech or any of the services or processes that we have, the patient is always at the forefront of my mind. On the back of that, the other thing so the forefront of mind is the user experience. So our clinicians that are providing the care, so how are they adapting, how are they managing with all the clinical systems and stuff that we have. So thinking about that user experience, and everyone is qualified to do that, because you'll all be interacting with patients and you'll all have provided patient care at some point. So by definition, that means everyone can take part in this journey. I think the other thing that kind of makes me good at what I do is reflection. So just being able to reflect on things that have not gone well. So you can't expect to work in a digital environment and expect everything to go well 100% of the time. Things will go wrong. It's about learning from those experiences and adapting and moving on. Digital health, especially at my end of the spectrum, is very, very fast paced. And that means that you need to be reflective and adaptive and be able to change. And again, they're skills that you don't need to have any special qualifications for. They're skills that a lot of pharmacists probably already possess. So they're the key things for me, really.
Brilliant, thank you. Yeah, clearly there's lots of transferable skills that you can apply to any situation. So my next question was going to be, how do we engage digitally with our workforce? And I wanted to combine it with one of the questions we've got from our listeners, Komal, who's also asked about whether we need to start exposing pharmacists from undergraduate to training or experience within digital health, and how we can do that. So so I'll start with you, Nabila, on that question.
Yeah, I completely agree. So I think Sarah touched on it. Start young, start when they're training, have something in your university education about digital health. It's going to happen. You're going to be expected to consult with patients digitally at some point in your career. But also what we're introducing, hopefully from the end of this year, is pre-reg. So, we'll be having pre-reg trainees working with us. So they'll have half of their time in a community pharmacy and half of their time with us, where there'll be a really digital approach. Obviously, we're not going to be able to take on every single pre-reg in the UK as much as I'd love to. But yeah, I definitely think that there's room for us to expose students and people really early on in their careers to the digital environment, and also just thinking about how the systems are working for them and providing feedback, to empowering people to provide feedback on, okay, this is not really working very well. So this EPS, this aspect of EPS is brilliant, but actually this aspect of EPS just needs a bit of tweaking. I think that we all just need to be a bit more empowered to provide that feedback and to engage in the conversations around building that tech.
Yeah, that's brilliant. Yeah, that's a great point, Nabila. I know countless times when something doesn't work, you just scream at the screen rather than do something productive. So actually, if there was a channel to go, right, this isn't working, that would probably be more helpful than just screaming at the screen, and then it doesn't change or it doesn't improve. Zeenab, did you want to add anything to that?
So just to add, so I think there are various opportunities for students and for pre-regs. I think there's things that you can do, as I did for my dissertation. There's things you can do in summer placements. I know I get lots of pre-regs to come and do some benefits realization work for me. So I think there's lots of opportunities, but having said that, I do think it needs to be a more core element in the curriculum itself, because actually what we now have access to in terms of big data and the ability to kind of proactively deliver healthcare rather than the reactive approach we've been taking, I think there's definitely more we need to do. There's an element of data science that we probably need to start teaching people to look at data and how to interpret it. So I think there's more work we need to do, but I think whatever opportunity you can find, take it, because actually the reality is when you graduate, everything is digital, and it certainly will be by the time you graduate, most likely, and it's only going to increase in that sense. So I think there's stuff out there, but there's more we could be doing too.
Yeah, I was just going to ask Sarah, is there something that employers and organizations could be doing more to focus on this element to support the number of opportunities that are coming up?
I think so. I think firstly, it's really important for yourself to realize how digitally mature you are in terms of your digital journey and the workforce. So there's useful tools out there. So there's the digital capabilities framework from HEE, and then from the Faculty of Clinical Informatics, there's for more advanced pharmacists to gauge where you are and then identify kind of any areas that you need to develop. And it's really important kind of basic IT skills. So kind of have an understanding of your current system, to help you kind of bridge between technical and clinical, so that you have some kind of understanding. As we mentioned earlier, you have those technical experts on your team, but just so that you have this kind of an understanding enough to be able to suggest changes and be kind of strong in your opinion of how the system should work as a clinician, because that is what you're the expert in. They're the expert in developing the software, and even just kind of things like, as Zeenab mentioned, there's data out there, and a lot of times we're putting it in Excel. So get competent or proficient at Excel to kind of interpret that data and use it however you kind of feel. I think there's probably, in terms of university, it definitely needs to become more of a core module that needs to be studied, and probably from the moment you get in, so from first year, and start that golden thread going through the degree. And there are kind of loads of opportunities out there, as Zeenab said, to kind of reach out to sites, especially when you're doing your clinical placements. If you're a student, ask, can you get involved, even if it's a project you might have to do outside of hours. It's really important to learn and to develop those skills. I think what we also shouldn't forget is we shouldn't forget the soft skills. So just, you still need to have the communication skills, and to realize how important our role is, because very often digital doesn't replace that person, that people, that contact, and that patients need and want. Although obviously virtual is fantastic, sometimes you just want kind of that face to face, and you want someone to ask you, are you okay, and hear someone's voice. And that's really important too, not to forget the soft skills. Digital digital won't replace that, and can't replace that.
No, that in itself is an additional skill, isn't it? Even like telephone triaging or online triaging, that's an additional skill to face to make sure you're getting the right information out of the patient or the person that you're speaking to. So conscious of time, just to kind of wrap it up, is there any networks or tips that you'd give anyone who's kind of like just teetering on the border, just to kind of want to dip their toe in to hear what's going on, so that they're aware of upcoming things? Is there anything that you would recommend, or Twitter profiles or anyone to follow or join, or so such like that? So Zeenab, anyone?
Yeah, so I'd probably give the Shuri network a plug. So it's a network that's been set up for women of colour in particular who work in digital health roles, and they have lots of opportunities for fellowship and for speed mentoring, and you can do some shadowing as well. So I would definitely kind of give them a follow on Twitter. They've got a website as well, and you can join, anyone can join, whether you're a man or a woman, but you can absolutely join the network, and that's quite a good opportunity, I think.
Brilliant, thanks Zeenab. Nabila?
I would go with following some of the CEOs of some of the startups that you think are working really well. So at the moment, I would obviously, I'm very biased, I'm going to say follow Ali Parsa on whatever social media you can. Also Nadeem Sawa, so Flow, Digital Pharmacy. Great guy, really great things they're doing in that pharmacy, but also there's lots of other people that are doing some really great things in the digital health space, and they're very good at keeping up to date with what is happening, and also you can see what they're doing in their particular startups as well.
Brilliant, thank you. And Sarah?
I think, like I mentioned earlier, there's the Clinical of Informatics, so they're useful to follow because they also run MDT, and so you can learn from other healthcare professionals and non-healthcare professionals, so you get a broader kind of understanding of systems. Probably people, and I haven't done it myself, but I think Zeenab, you have, anyone who's done the Digital Academy, they tend to be kind of very digitally focused and are really good to follow, because they might retweet things or be aware of what's happening in the pipeline. And that's a good, if you are, and Zeenab can touch on this more than me, but the Digital Academy or the Digital Fellowship are both kind of two really good opportunities to develop, and the Tuple Review the Tuple Fellowship as well is another fellowship out there that's available to pharmacists to apply to.
Brilliant, that's great. Yeah, it is just about doing it, and these fellowships are only a year. Like me and Sarah are Chief Pharmaceutical Officers Fellows, and it's a year, and if you don't like it, you can go back. And also what you learn from what you don't like is really important as well. No experience is ever a bad experience as such, because you can learn what you're good at and what you're not good at, and what to avoid. So that's brilliant. Thank you so much for your time today. So we've run out of time, which is a real shame, but I want to say thank you. And if people wanted to put comments or follow you guys on LinkedIn or Twitter, I'm sure that you're happy for people to engage with you as well, to ask you questions. Please do, if anyone's listening that would like to speak or reach out to Sarah, Zeenab and Nabila. So I just want to say thank you again to our panel, and we'll be back next week with our COVID, in caring in COVID, and looking at how the impact of working from home and the need for flexible working has impacted women throughout the pandemic, and especially in pharmacy, and how we can improve that. So tune in again next week. But thank you very much for listening, and we'll see you next week.